Hi, this is Chris Hoy. Thank you for joining me on Create with Chris. Today's video is a little different than what I normally do. I'm decorating for Christmas, and as I was decorating my front porch, I decided I wanted a festive red pillow for my rocking chairs. My summer pillows were still good, but shabby and weather weary. I was going to toss them, but I remembered that the chalk paint works on fabric, and I thought I would just give it a try. See how this old, worn-out pillow evolves into a custom designer showpiece. I'm so excited with the transformation. Can't wait to do the other pillow, and I hope that you will be inspired to do the same. I'm using home decor chalk paint, and I'll list the links below, and a foam roller. This is a little bit thicker bodied paint than acrylic paint. I did moisten my sponge roller before I loaded it for a couple reasons. It helps conserve on the paint, so most of the moisture goes in the sponge and then the paint stays on the outside of the roller. I thought maybe a foam roller would apply the paint just a little bit smoother and not require as many coats, maybe not apply it so heavy. I did slip a heavy paper bag inside the pillow to keep the paint from saturating through. This was a very old pillow, and I did clean it to make sure the paint would adhere well. I should have ironed it because it was a little bit puffy. So the next pillow I paint, I'll definitely iron it well before. I did not use any prep, but because this had such a strong design on it, I had to go over it with a couple layers of paint. In my mind, 2 light layers always gives the best results as opposed to just the 1 layer. I knew I was going to do a second pillow and also the back side, so I just took my roller and rolled it up in a quart Ziploc bag and then sealed the top on it, and that'll keep it fresh until I'm ready to paint the other side and paint the other pillow. I position my stencil, and I'm just using painter's tape to adhere it. Now make sure that it is completely dry before you do this. I'm using my number 6 Spectacular stencil brush. I did wipe the tip of the bristles off after I loaded it just a little bit to make sure the paint is not too thick and heavy. That's what causes the outlines of the stenciling to get a little bit globby and not so clean and crisp. So after you load the brush, always make sure to kind of brush it over a paper towel just to keep those tips smooth. I always have to peek to make sure it's looking good before I continue on. And because this is just repetitive, and don't try to rush. It's a very simple application of paint. I'm using my painter's pal just to mask off the snowflakes. I didn't want to do those. I wasn't really sure what I wanted. And I had some other snowflakes I thought would be cuter, so I just went around these. I can always go back and put them in. But just keep methodical. I always start from left to right. That way I'm not dragging my hand. I'm right-handed. It's not going to get dragged through wet paint. That helps a lot. One thing that I didn't think about when I was using the chalk paint, it does take a little bit longer to dry because it is thicker bodied, but you need to keep that in mind so you give it plenty of dry time. But the plus side, because it's so thick, it's very opaque. Normally when I'm using the white chalk paint over a dark red surface, I put 1 coat on, but I did this rather lightly because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. So I do go back and put a 2nd coat on. Stencils are created with a little bridge to keep the letters from together on the stencil. Sometimes I like that look, but for this I wanted it to be more custom. So I'm using my number 2 Radical Round, just connecting those bridges with a little bit of that white chalky paint. And this is white Adirondack chalk paint. Love this color. It's just such a pure, strong white. Just beautiful, beautiful results. And it's not hard to connect those bridges. I think just taking this little bit of extra time does make a big difference for something like a home decor piece. And I always forget one. I was trying to be careful to remember to get all the bridges, and I think I forgot the one in the middle on the T. So I did have to go back and do that. Because I'm going to go back and add a second coat of stenciling over top the letters, I will also go back and do the bridges a second time too. I didn't want that dot there. So because I painted the background on this pillow top, I could go back and touch it up. If you already have a pillow top and you don't need to paint one, oh my goodness, you could crank this design out in a half an hour easy. That's including dry time and everything. But remember, when you get if you get paint on the background where that little dot was, it would have been fine after I got finished. I put little dots around, so it would have worked out. I wanted big splashy snowflakes, and I decided the best way to add the snowflakes would be to add the big ones first, and then I could easily go around and fill in with the smaller snowflakes. I didn't put a second coat on these snowflakes, so I just had to be real careful when I applied the first coat to get a nice even coverage. And again, I'm really having trouble keeping this pillow flat because it was so puffy. But I think if I'd ironed it, it would have solved that issue. And I'm just taking my time and I'm tapping, I'm not swirling. The texture of the fabric is a little bit different than wood or paper, and it has more tooth to it, so it's very easy to end up with a lot of open spaces. The paint dries, when the paint dries, it shrinks a little bit, it kind of opens up. So if I'm careful and I do a continuous tap, 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 and fill it in nicely, it'll eliminate that and I'll get a nice solid coverage. There's a fine line between putting too much paint on, isn't that beautiful, and going over it too quickly. But I didn't want to have to go back and line all those stencils up. So I was thinking that if I put it on very carefully the first time, they would be perfect. And look at that snowflake. It's just wonderful. So I'm just kind of picking and choosing. This is a blizzard background stencil. It has so many really intricate and beautiful snowflakes. It makes such a very, this is one stencil that I use over and over and over. I had my tap off paper too on the wrong side. It was just very awkward. So make sure that when you're doing a project that everything is easy access. That way you don't have to reach over something or drag it across the surface. Another tip to please keep in mind, my pillow had a zipper at the bottom, and when I rolled the paint on, I rolled it over the zipper, and then I had trouble getting the zipper to work because the paint dried over those little teeth in the zipper. So I had trouble getting it to open and shut again. It just took a little bit of encouraging, but I was able to get it to work well. But do keep that in mind. If you have a zipper, don't put paint over the zipper. And again, I'm using that little painter's tool to help mask off so I don't get paint where I don't want it. Those snowflakes are kind of close together, and it's easy to get into the next one when you don't want to. And then I found out when I was using that little template to kind of mask it off, it also helped to hold that fabric flat, so I was able to stencil it on a little bit easier. This one was really intricate, but it was one of my favorite snowflakes. So it was worth the little extra effort to put that pretty one on there. And you can see how I'm just masking that around. And keep that brush perpendicular. My stencil brushes are soft bristled, which means that you don't have to pounce really hard, and they will stencil very, very easily. It's just a wonderful stencil brush to apply the paint. If you struggle with stenciling, I'm telling you, these brushes are the perfect solution. I'm not a stenciler, and I had the worst time stenciling until I had these stencil brushes created, And with the soft bristle, I get a beautiful stencil every time. And I wondered how well they would work with fabric, but it works just perfectly. Look at those little snowflakes. So I just kind of go around once I get the big ones in. And this is where I kind of forgot about how long it takes the paint to dry, because I think when I put my stencil over top of some of the snowflakes that weren't completely dry, I got a little bit of wet paint on the back side of my stencil. See, can you see in that top left corner, or down just a little bit, there's some paint that was on there. I was able to touch it up with the red paint, but that just creates a little extra work. So pay attention as you're creating, and if you're careful with the little details, I'm telling you, it saves a tremendous amount of time in the long run. I had another little spot up at the top. I'm not going to point them all out because, well, I guess actually you'll see how I covered them up. So there's nothing that you do that can't be fixed. It just takes a little bit longer time. And you can see how putting these big snowflakes in, I'm trying to be a little bit random in their placement so that it's not all the same. And I found out that if you put the big ones in first and just kind of balance them around, it's much easier to work those little ones in and get that design to look nice and cohesive. And I just think I really had fun doing this. It's such a fun, simple project. And believe me, I was getting ready to toss these pillows because they were so nasty. And I've had them for a long time, but they're outdoor pillows, and I knew they would do well. Speaking of outdoors, chalk paint is not made to withstand the weather. I have a covered front porch, so I don't have to worry about it. If you are planning to put the pillows outside in the weather, you might want to go with acrylic paint. The only thing is, with acrylic paint, it's going to take a lot more layers of paint to get a good solid design on it. Nice opaque design. This chalk paint is so ideal. I know everybody uses it for furniture and for signage, but I thought maybe I would give it a try on fabric to see if it actually does work well. When I was finished, my pillow was still super soft and flexible, which was amazing. I thought it might get kind of hard and crunchy with the paint on it so heavily. And also, the paint, chalk paint comes in an 8-ounce bottle. Actually, I think I went back and put a third coat on this because the design was so strong and the light did kind of show through a little bit. I used less than a quarter of a bottle, so I could do 4 pillows if I wanted to paint the entire pillow. And these are probably 14-inch pillows. I'm not really sure. I did not measure them, but they're at least 14 to 18-inch pillows. And this is where I enjoy this part where you just go in, add a snowflake here, a snowflake there, and you can see I'm not reloading my brush all that often. This brush has a bazillion bristles in it. It holds a tremendous amount of paint, super easy to work with. So reloading not so often gives me more playtime and less struggling time to work on cleaning and reloading and that type of thing. Because the chalk paint is so opaque and such a thick-bodied paint, make sure to clean the stencils and the stencil brushes off well before when you are finished. If it dries, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to get them cleaned up. And you definitely want to take good care of your tools. I like that little tiny snowflake, so I thought it would be fun to go in and just fill in between. And I'm using my Painter's Pal circle as a masking tool. See how I can just center it over those little snowflakes, and I don't have to worry about it over stenciling because I've got a really big brush. But what's nice, because I have such a big brush, I can just pounce the entire snowflake and it covers it all with that the size of the brush covers the entire snowflake on those little ones, and you can crank them out in no time at all. And I was having so much fun. I probably could have stopped earlier, but you see those big empty places and one little snowflake would look adorable there. You just have to go in and add just that one more. Probably all in all, it took about an hour and a half to paint this. I did use my heat tool to expedite the dry time so that I could move on a little more quickly. Once you get started, you get kind of antsy to get it finished and see how it's going to turn out. And in my mind, I'm going, just one more snowflake. Just one more snowflake. Okay, I decided to stop. I'm using my extra large stylus, and I'm just adding some snowfall dip dots. These are pretty random, but I did have some places where I had a little bit of paint that came off the back of the stencil, so that was a good place to put some little falling snowflakes. Some of the places I just went back with a red paint and touched it up. Be careful. Again, you should start on the left side. Make sure you don't drag your hand through the paint. I didn't want little teeny tiny flecks of paint. Yes, I did get my hand in the snowflake. So I used the great big fat end of my stylus. If you don't have a big stylus, the handle end of a brush is perfect. I wanted these little falling snowflakes to have a good bit of substance to them. And this whole time I'm really excited about stuffing that pillow and getting it back on the front porch. Also, on my front porch, we have tremendous wind where I live, and I have to really anchor everything down. I was worried about, in the summertime, my pillows get blown away. So I decided to take a safety pin. I took about 18 inches of ribbon, and I safety pinned it to the back of the pillow, and then I just tied it onto the lattice of my rocking chair. And once you get it tied on there, it's not going to go anywhere. What a difference those little tiny dots make. Make sure that paint stays fresh. Once it starts to tack up, you need to grab a fresh puddle of paint because your little snowfall won't be round, and you definitely want it to. I did dip and dot several times. It gives random sized dots, and I try not to make them too perfect. I want them to be staggered and random. Everything I used in this video is listed in the links below, and I think this wraps up my designer pillows for Pennies. I hope you're leaving with a ton of inspiration and maybe some ideas for fantastic gifts. Let me know in the comments if you're planning on painting some pillows. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up before you leave. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together.